Mike Ferreri is the longtime sports director at KOMO Channel 4 News in Seattle, covering the Huskies, and nice enough to join us this morning right here on the Gary Harris Show. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Gary. Happy holidays to you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. We, of course, have been breaking down this game left and right here on the program for a couple of weeks now, ever since it was announced that the Tide would play Washington in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl college football semifinal. First, Mike, just the reaction there in Washington. I know this has been a great season. How concerned after the loss to USC were Washington fans and coaches, players, administrators that they might not make it into the playoff? Was that a real concern, or did they feel pretty good about their chances after the Pac-12 championship game? I
think they obviously were concerned because there was still plenty of football left to be played. I don't think they were taking any of the conference and what was left for granted. Because every year when you play Washington State, it doesn't matter when these two teams, if one's having a terrific season and maybe one won one game, the Apple Cup is just a special game in that all the records really do get thrown out. It's just kind of got that weird feeling to it as a matchup every year. It just doesn't matter. So they knew they were going to have to get through that before they'd even have any consideration. So I know it definitely is cliche, and it's what all the players talk about, but it really was 1 week at a time for them. Once they took care of Arizona State, Browning got some confidence back. They were ready to go against Washington State. And Myles Gaskin, the running back for the Huskies, said it best this week, is that they were in kind of a can't-lose situation. They knew they were going to go to the Rose Bowl or the college football playoff, but if you've ever been to Pasadena, which I think you have.
I have, yeah.
That's a nice place to be.
Absolutely.
So not a bad spot. They weren't exactly going to be, heading to Detroit. No offense to them, but for the Motor City Bowl or something like that.
Mike, a lot's going to be made of the experience that Alabama has, not just in terms of the roster with Washington having so many young players, but experience in this playoff. Bama's been in it all 3 years. First time for the Huskies. Also, a lot is going to be made about the logistical situation. It's a 2-hour and 45-minute drive for Alabama. It's a cross-country flight for Washington. So there seems to be some advantages in the Alabama corner. A lot of people, too, in a very simplistic approach, are going to look at the USC games. Alabama beat them 52-6. Granted, Max Brown was the quarterback, first game of the year. Washington got handled by USC late in the year. From a Washington perspective, why is that not a good barometer to use for this game coming up between the Tide and the Huskies?
Well, you bring up some really good points. It definitely is the other side of the country, just the time zone. I don't think when it comes to charter flights and the way these guys travel, even on the collegiate level, I don't think that's much of a concern, especially with them getting in a week ahead to get adjusted to the time change and everything that comes along with that. As far as the whole USC matchup goes, they learned some things about themselves in that game, and the roundabout way is probably a good thing to have that happen to them. They saw that they were human. I think there was a little more pressure with the undefeated aspect, which maybe you guys experienced, or maybe not, because you're so used to winning down there. And so when it came to, USC was just such a different team in November than they were at the beginning of the year. Really different. They just clicked. And I've always been a fan of just watching USC just because they have such wonderful athletes, and the way they play the game is, that whole West Coast feel to things, and so fast. And so I think they were a completely different team than Alabama saw early in the year. And to lose at home, I think, was probably the rough thing for Washington and everything that came along with it. What I found interesting was the hype and the build-up, if you want to talk about the connection to it being the college football playoff. Game day came that weekend. Browning was being mentioned in Heisman talk. So I think there was a lot of pressure that came with that weekend, and everything cracked. And it kind of allowed them to regroup and get ready to where they are now.
Nick Saban said on Friday that he wanted to just go ahead and, for the record, say that this is the best team Alabama has played, period. He was a little bit put off by some talk about Clemson or Ohio State. He wanted to make it clear that nobody in the organization was looking ahead at all. And I agree with him. I look at this Washington team. Let's start with the offense, Mike. All kinds of weapons. You mentioned Browning. I think 41 touchdown passes, 2 great running backs in Gaskin and Coleman. John Ross, who I think will be the best wide receiver Alabama has seen. Offensively, not only can Washington score a lot of points, they can do it in a lot of different ways. And that's a concern for any defense, even one as good as Alabama's.
Yeah, they can. And, Ross was talking this week about the Huskies being the underdogs. And, the pressure is on Alabama to win this game, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys have nothing to lose. Nobody thinks they're going to win. So go in there and just have fun, experience the moment, and let it fly. What do they have to lose? Peterson's kind of known for his trick plays or pulling stuff out of the bag when he has to. I don't know if you'll see that or not, but, when you give the guy a month to prepare, as you do Alabama, different things are going to come about. But they will get you running-wise. It all depends on who's hot. Myles Gaskin is a real shifty running back. Ross is so fast, but you have Dante Pettis, who's also a great receiver, kind of plays on the other side of Ross. Daniels is a great tight end, and the offensive line is the best we've seen here in Washington in a long, long time. So they make things happen. But I think the big difference that you're going to see from where he was in USC, then Arizona State, through Washington State in the Pac-12 championship, is that Browning's had some time to rest. He was a real slender guy when he got here as a freshman, got thrown right into the fire right away. And then last year put on about 15, 20 pounds. And I actually saw him lose some weight as this season went on, just a little bit. And I think he had a little bit of a dead arm, to tell you the truth, by the time the end of the season came around. So I think it's like a pitcher, right? I mean, anytime you're not going to throw a guy every single day. He needs some significant rest. And I think the rest is really going to benefit his arm. I think he'll be sharper because they just shut him down after practice for a while. Just get through exams, watch a lot of film, rejuvenate that arm, have some therapy, go forward from there.
Mike Ferreri, our guest here on the Bud Light Hotline. He's the sports director at KOMO-TV, Channel 4, ABC affiliate in Seattle, talking Washington versus Alabama. Let's talk about a very important matchup, and that is the Washington offensive line against that Alabama front. The Alabama front has been incredible against the run. They have put a lot of pressure on the passer. As good as Washington is on offense, if they can't hold up front, it won't matter what they try to do. What do you think about that matchup? I know there are a couple of young offensive linemen, albeit very talented, trying to match up against this Alabama defense.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be one thing to watch of many facets of this game. But they knew right away after they found out that they were going to play Alabama that they would have to be more physical. This is already a physical bunch, and the Pac-12 has its own brand of football, as does the SEC. So what they're doing, we're not allowed to go in and watch any practice. I mean, it's definitely shut down. It's been that way all year, so it's not like it's something new with Chris Peterson. That's just the way it is. I don't know what it's like down there for you guys. But it's not even like the NFL. We don't even get 10 minutes to get them stretching or
we do get a period or two.
Yeah, we don't have anything. I have lobbied hard for that, but that's just kind of Chris Peterson's way. So That's nothing out of the ordinary. But they know that it's going to be a physical grind, and I think from a distance, and obviously you guys are so intertwined with Alabama football and see it on a regular basis as I do Washington. From a distance, man, it just looks like those guys allow some teams, Alabama that is, allow teams to hang with them, and then they just wear them down, if that's the case in that second half. And it just seemed to be the games that I saw, they are just so physically superior to everybody they play. And the Huskies know that. So what they're doing this month to get ready and having that time, they're not turning around and playing on 6 days rest. That's a big deal. So they know what's coming, and so they just need to be ready.
On the other side of the ball, this Washington defense, I've been impressed from what I've seen, watching some tape of them up front. They're big, physical, can move, great secondary. Alabama has a freshman quarterback. Now, I know Jalen Hurts has had a terrific year. He's the SEC Offensive Player of the Year as a freshman, but he is a freshman. What's the feeling up there that this defense for Washington maybe can rattle him or put him in some bad down and distance situations? How do you see that matchup, Washington's defense against the Alabama offense, namely Jalen Hurts, a freshman quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, come on, you guys were in the table in the SEC with the freshman quarterback.
True enough.
I don't know if they're going to need to, be able to rattle him as much as just constant pressure. The Huskies are, if you're talking as you go through the levels of the defense. I mean, they lost Joe Mathis about mid-season, and he was their sack leader, and he was a guy. If you want to talk about pressure, I mean, he was that guy that really put the pressure on the quarterbacks, and he was making a huge difference. He was gone. A couple weeks later, they lose Azim Victor, who was really, the top linebacker for the team, one of the best in the Pac-12 conference, and he's out. So really it's going to be by committee. I think you might see a rotation on the defensive line real similar to what the Seahawks are known for up here in the NFL level, is that they're just going to bring it constantly to go against a great offensive line. So there's just so many aspects. But as far as that kid being a freshman or your quarterback being a freshman, that's probably not a factor when you look at 12-0 record.
Good point. Very good point. All right, I want to ask you as a reporter in the fan base, did you see this coming this year? I mean, Washington was pretty good in Peterson's first 2 years, but 6 losses each season, and then all of a sudden this year, 12-1, Pac-12 champions, college football playoff. Was that something you thought might be a possibility going into the season, Mike, or is this team ahead of schedule, this program ahead of schedule?
They had the playmakers, and I think the big thing was, to me, the frailty of Browning I saw in his first season. And when he showed up in August, adding that 15, 20 pounds, as you know, you need to be durable in this game. I thought he had on him what he needed to get through a whole season and endure those games in November. Of course, we saw what happened against USC. Did I see it? No. Did I think maybe the Rose Bowl or Holiday kind of, when you think in terms of West Coast bowl games, the Alamo is kind of still one of those Pac-12 affiliated bowls that is a ways away, that I think is like second or third in the tier. But as far as, just the way they were playing, and you kind of take your lumps, you lose those games that maybe you don't think you're going to lose. But to do what they did and to go and win the Pac-12 championship in just Chris Peterson's third year, I mean, it's kind of crazy, to tell you the truth. I thought maybe it'd be year 4 or 5 that this would happen. You kind of think, everybody's got the potential for a Rose Bowl. You knew USC was kind of getting things together. Stanford lost a ton of guys on their offensive line. You never know the wild card that is Utah. They do really well the first 2/3 of the season. It seemed to always fizzle in the last third, but they were really playing well, and that was one of the tougher games for the Huskies this year, was when they went to Utah and won really in the last couple minutes. So, conference top to bottom, I'm not totally blown away, but I am surprised.
Mike, I got to ask you about Steve Sarkisian, and you probably knew this was coming when you agreed to do the interview.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm curious about a lot of things because Nick Saban, like Chris Peterson, runs a very tight ship. You don't get to talk to assistant coaches during the year. Obviously, you don't get to talk to offensive analysts. So none of us have talked to Steve Sarkisian, even since he's been named the offensive coordinator for 2017. But I know he was very popular there in Seattle. He did a good job. That's why he got the job at USC. First, though, the drinking issue, the substance abuse. Did anybody have an inkling of that while he was at Washington? Did that ever raise its head as a media guy? Did you know that he was drinking, or did it catch you off guard when he got to USC?
You hear things. I never saw anything because, our hours, we're always covering a game and working late and then going to bed and getting ready for the next day. So I can't say I was ever out somewhere where I saw Steve Sarkisian partaking, but you heard things.
Right.
But I think regardless of, personally, we all have our demons in some range, I guess, at some point or another. Obviously wasn't a good thing, and that my first concern is I certainly hope Sark as an individual is healthier. I've seen some shots of him. We got some video that looks like he lost a ton of weight, and it's a hard battle. It affects so many people. So why should a coach be excluded from the normal pressures that come along with everyday life that all of us face? But I certainly hope he's on the right track, and it seems like he is. I mean, especially for Nick Saban, who I think is a pretty darn good judge of character, to give him this opportunity. I don't think Sark's gonna blow it. But I think what can't be lost in the grand scheme of things is really what he did for the Washington program. He brought him back to a bowl game after a long drought. They went to the Holiday Bowl and beat Nebraska. I was standing there, it was in San Diego, and one of the coolest things about Sarkisian is that I think he really does enjoy the college football atmosphere in the moment. He brought his team out rather than sitting there for the entire halftime in the locker room. There was a fireworks show at halftime of the Holiday Bowl. He brought his guys out and had them all kind of, at the team entrance there at Qualcomm, and had them all kind of huddled around. He's like, just take this in. Watch this. Isn't this great?
That's
he wanted the guys to not only, win and play well, but he wanted them to experience the moment because they were so few and far between for Washington. So a lot of the guys on the senior class that will be playing against Alabama, he helped bring to Washington. There were certain guys like Shaq Thompson who he helped bring to Washington, a lot of the coordinators, Justin Wilcox, guys like that, of course, key in the recruiting. they would say that they weren't always sure what type of mood he'd be in, one way or the other. And so, as far as a coach and what he gave to the Washington program, I mean, he kind of lifted them out of the abyss they were in for a long time, and I think he deserves that credit. As a person and an individual, I'm sure we all need work, and I'm sure Steve is probably a lot different than now than when he went to USC and moving on with his career and his life, I hope.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out though that you're right. When he took over Washington, it was in bad shape, and he got it turned around. And as you said, a lot of these seniors he recruited. Sounds like you enjoyed covering him. Sounds like he was a fun coach to be around.
I did. I really did. He was always great to me personally. We would go on the road with the Huskies, and some of these guys are locked down. Leave me alone. Don't talk. We'd go to walkthrough. We'd show up with the bus, and he I think he'd noticed that I was the only station that was there, and so hey, let's stop and talk, and ask the fair questions. You get fair answers. He was never a jerk to any of us. He was always fair. Internally, you never know what you could live on a street, right? And you walk down, you never know what goes on behind people's closed doors. I mean, their house could look perfect on the outside, but you don't know what goes on the inside. Unfortunately, his whole life was exposed. He hit rock bottom, and I think he pulled himself out of it. It's kind of a testament to him. But I look forward. I hope I can see him just to say hi to him, because I think he's a good guy and he's a great offensive mind. I think you guys got lucky, and if Sark can just kind of stay the course, both personally and professionally, Alabama, struck it big.
Real quickly, Mike, and I'll let you go. As far as Sarkisian's concerned, most of the players are Chris Peterson's players, his recruits. It's a different system. But any concern there in Seattle that, Sarkisian does have some insight into the Washington program, and that might be an advantage for Alabama?
They always say you coach what you see on tape, right? So it's not like there's any surprise. John Ross is one of the fastest guys you'll ever see. Buda Baker, who came in after Steve left, he's a guy that is fantastic on defense. The freshman, the offensive line is so loaded with youth, I don't think it's going to give him any indication. So as an offensive analyst, I'm sure he can pick up certain things. But as far as it's just so drastically different what Chris Peterson does, how he goes about his business, how he runs the program, what they do offensively and defensively. I don't think anything is going to be, figured out from him having spent some time on Mount Lake, just because in that 3 years there's been such a difference in everything.
For sure. Hey, folks, if you want to keep up with the Huskies leading up to this game, you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike KOMO Sports. That's at Mike KOMO Sports. Thanks for the time. I'll look you up in Atlanta and say hello. I appreciate it. Great insight, Mike.
Yeah, Gary. We'll look for you for sure. I'm looking forward to it. I used to live in Memphis, cover the SEC for a while, and that's kind of a crazy town because everybody's got different allegiances. But it'll be interesting to be back in that atmosphere again, because there's no, in my opinion, there's no more passionate fan base than SEC football fans, and it is an experience.
Good stuff. I appreciate it. Take care, Mike.
Thanks, Gary.